The definition of WHO with regard to what is health. It's actually your physical well-being, your mental well-being and your social well-being. It's because, unfortunately from smaller days, we are groomed in such a way that we constantly feel that we are very less. If your relationships are messed up, that means that affects your physicality and your mentality. It's health at the end of the day. It's looking after your mindset. Mostly what we procrastinate is actually things that's not very urgent, but things that's very important. We are in a world where we are very high tech but less touch. So now people have started realizing how important this touch element is. And that's human touch. I would say, I would use this, we are a cocktail of emotions. Change is a choice. You can't force change upon someone. Having emotional intelligence will make you a star in an organization. It's very difficult for this generation to look into someone's eyes and actually say something, express something. Children are tyrants. They no longer respect elders, and they chatter in places and this and that. And when I tell this to parents and they go, yeah, nowadays kids are like that. But the interesting part is that this was said by Socrates. It's not up to us to fix a generation, because our way, our tools will not work for them.
Global talent is an amazing phenomenon. Talent can be used to change the world. However, the question is, are we using the right talent at the right time for the right situations? Hello everyone, welcome to Winning CV Game Changers, the podcast featuring game changers from around the world to give the wisdom to the youth who are ready to take the reins of the world in the future. Winning CV Game Changers podcast will feature game changers, personalities from diverse industries with different exposure, which will be an impetus to the success of the world and also the Winning CV Game Changers podcast. So the launch episode, we have a prominent personality from Sri Lanka. She is an international well-being consultant for the International Transport Federation, and she's the counseling psychologist for Mind Heals. Rasini Bandara. Rasini, welcome to Winning CV Game Changers, and you are the first guest of our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sasanka. It's quite stressful actually, first person, but I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much again.
And thank you very much for accepting the invite to feature as the first guest. So let's begin the conversation, Rasini.
Yes.
I would like to, I saw something very interesting in your LinkedIn banner, which said, personality begins where comparison ends. Let's start with personality, because I wanted to touch on this fact, because it is absolutely important for youth. How important is personality for youth?
Well, actually, I think it's the most important thing, personality, because you know why, Sasanka, you very correctly said, personality begins where comparison ends. I mean, first time when I saw that, I realized that this is something that I want to always people to see. It's because, unfortunately from smaller days, we are groomed in such a way that we constantly feel that we are very less. And then we are constantly being compared also. First of all, your family does it for you, and then later on the society. And then, leaving aside the family and the society, you started doing it to yourself. However, this comparison game absolutely destroys one's personality. Now, personality is a factor that for many years, many psychologists and individuals tried to give a definition, but failed. So some said that it's coming from birth, you're born with it, and some were saying, no, you learn it. But however, now they have come and made peace with the factor that, yes, you are born with it also, but at the same time, you need to groom it as well. So personality is very unique. I think that's where everyone agrees and comes to I would say, an agreement. It's a very unique factor. No two individuals can have the same personality. But personality is also owning it to yourself. And when you really own it, I think that's the point where your true, unique personality starts showing to other people. So it's absolutely important to youth, but at the same time, I would say it's important to everyone. And grooming of it starts from very younger days. So, I mean, rather than waiting till you figure it out in your youth and maybe years later on, I think if one is able to figure it out from smaller days, I think that's the best that can happen to any individual.
Absolutely. So I think you touched upon an important point about personality and how it is important, essential for the youth. And you're an international well-being consultant. So when you talk about well-being, especially mental well-being, very important in the current context. We are talking of future of work, remote work, hybrid work, so on and so forth. What are your thoughts on mental well-being, and how should the youth get ready with the mental well-being aspect when they are looking at the future of work?
Good question, Sasanka. I would start answering from this point, because if you see the definition of WHO with regard to what is health, it's actually your physical well-being, your mental well-being, and your social well-being. So I know for a fact that we always give a lot of importance to physical well-being, but the other two we kind of ignore. And people think, oh yeah, physical well-being is very important. At the same time, it's good to manage and handle, balance a bit on mental and social well-being. But the interesting factor is that all these three need to be in a beautiful sync in order for an individual to be healthy as an individual. So if your relationships are messed up, that means that affects your physicality and your mentality. If your physical well-being is not very well maintained, that's going to impact your mental well-being, at the same time your social well-being. Your social well-being is your most closest circle, your people, your, I would say, family. And if you're working somewhere, then your peers, your colleagues. And if you're in school, your friends. And so all these three elements need to be in a beautiful sync, like I said. So therefore, you can't exactly say this is important and this is not very important. But however, I would say the world is changing now. People are realizing that a lot of importance should be exercised on mental well-being, because, you know, during the time that we were going through work from home or learning from home, people started realizing everything was provided, but what were we missing? And then came to the question that, oh yes, it's actually mental well-being.
Exactly.
So the thing is it's health at the end of the day. It's looking after your mindset. It's about taking care of yourself. It's very simple. Whenever we say mental health or mental well-being, we completely connect it to a mental asylum. It's not where you're going to go to. It's actually you being a productive individual. You being productive.
Let me interrupt you there, Rasini.
Yes, of course.
So you talked about health, and that's important.
Yes.
It's like number one. Right?
Yeah.
But with the busy schedules that the youth are in now,
yes,
sometimes they might have an argument. This can be an argument saying, how do we find time for mental well-being? What is your answer to that?
Well, I would always say that it's an excuse, Sasanka, because to be very honest, if you really want to exercise time onto something, you will find time.
Absolutely.
And then if you do not want to exercise time, you will always find excuses to do that. I mean, I have seen a lot of people who are really busy with their life, but still somehow find 15 to 20 minutes for a workout, who'll find some time for me time, who'll find some time to journal, who'll find some time to watch a movie or enjoy a television series. I mean, all these things are a part of well-being.
Absolutely.
What happens is actually the way you prioritize your time. See, the thing is, mostly what we procrastinate is actually things that's not very urgent, but things that's very important. So then, because there's no urgency in, let's say, doing a workout or writing or as journaling or even listening to music, you always procrastinate it thinking, oh, you know what, this time I will write this particular project report, and then, you know, whenever I can find time, I'll do my workout. So this is what happens. But if you kind of properly look into it, if you really try to exercise a little bit of time into understanding what you should be prioritizing and what you should not be prioritizing, I'm sure people can find time. I find time. So I have seen people finding time to do that. So I always think it's an excuse.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
So let's talk about emotional intelligence. Now, I want to focus on your global exposure as well, because you travel to countries and participate in training sessions. What is your experience, or what can you share with us about emotional intelligence? Because when youth are grooming to become leaders, because leaders should groom leaders, not followers. When they are being groomed to become leaders, having empathy, understanding the emotions of another person, these are absolutely important. How important, and what is your view comparing experiences from around the world that you have had about emotional intelligence? What can you tell us?
Well, I would say it's a topic that's that's taken the world by a storm. I think people are more and more opening themselves into topics like this. And at the same time, Sasanka, we also need to understand the world is changing. We are in a world where we are very high tech but less touch. So now people have started realizing how important this touch element is, and that's human touch. So why a lot of people the reason that a lot of people think that, which will take you to greater heights in a career is, of course, your intelligence, at your IQ. So whether a formal degree or, whether it's your MBA or PhD or whatever. But at the end of the day, why a lot of people struggle in their careers, why a lot of people have very less employee engagement, why people go into burnout, and at the same time, why people get fired or leave their jobs is actually due to lack of EQ. Because if you're a human being, then that means you are, I would say, I would use this, you're a cocktail of emotions. You have a lot of emotions fluctuating all the time.
Yeah.
And then you get to deal with individuals who are similar to you, who also go through fluctuations of emotions. And then this is not just for workplace, this is in your home front as well, and with your friends as well. So then having the intelligence to actually properly handle and manage your emotions is highly essential. And in a world, I would say that we always think that we need to understand people, but we exercise a lot of energy to understand people, but how well we can understand someone is always a question. But I would like to replace that word and say it's about acceptance. So when you, again, back to the first question you asked, when you are a very secure individual, when you're a very safe individual in terms of your mindset about your personality, then acceptance of another personality comes very naturally. Then you don't actually try to change someone, because I always say that change is a choice.
Yes.
You can't force change upon someone. So then you learn to accept individuals, and you learn to see the good in them, and then maybe even to sometimes ignore the bad in them as well. So this is emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
So this is highly essential, because you know what, the components of EQ starts building up in an individual by the time of 13 months as a baby.
Okay.
But unfortunately, we don't groom these things in children. So we put them to a rat race of, going after exams after exams, but then we never groom these things. But like I said, the world is changing.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
How tarnishing is that, Rasini? This rat race.
Big time. Because you know why? Even smaller days, now of course, when I go and do workshops, I tell people, look, we have different learning styles, but then we ignore all the other learning styles and we push them into one academic way of learning, which is also quite unfair on children. For us, we never could voice out also, because we are groomed to be very passive learners, very passive listeners, very passive communicators. It's either passive or aggressive. So we were never taught to be assertive in life. But the generations to come, I think, have that chance of being assertive. They are in that mindset. They question things. So it's again, I think, up to us. I think we are given a big social responsibility to navigate them in the right way. Yes, they do have issues when it comes to communication because they are a tech-driven generation and we are a very touch generation. So then it's up to us to give that kind of navigation to them. And like I said, the world is changing, Sasanka. So multinational organizations are no longer interested in you having one honors degree or this many years of experience. They are more concerned by the factor of looking at whether are you emotionally intelligent, do you have resilience in you, can you face tough situations and challenges, are you a team player? So these are, I would say, nowadays considered as essential skills for individuals more than a degree, certificate or something like that. And at the same time, I would say having emotional intelligence will make you a star in an organization wherever you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that builds solid connections, that build very genuine connections. And at the end of the day, people who really climbs whatever that ladder are actually people who are people's, who find that connectivity very easy.
You're absolutely spot on, Rasini. So let's touch upon Generation Z. But before that, there is something which is very fascinating that I came across, right, in a podcast. So these guests were saying, everyone talks about B2B and B2C. No one talks about H to H, human to human, right? So when you take Generation Z, very tech savvy, very smart, and they are thinking ahead. How important is the human touch for Generation Z? When you consider your experience going global, how do you see the Generation Z in various countries?
Right. So, Sasanka, good question. I actually work a lot with seafarers because for the International Transport Federation, I go and transfer knowledge on stress identification and management. We speak about depression, anxiety, suicide prevention, all these things. So then it's pretty much like this. So no one's life changes as a life of a seafarer because you study in a university and suddenly you are put on board a ship 6 months, 1 year away from your family, away from your loved ones. No one speaks your language, no one eats your food. So people have actually started facing a lot of issues with regard to mental health, and then of course going ahead with suicide. So what we have done is actually we developed a module to teach them stress identification and management, so that will help them when they are on board a ship. So when I speak to certain senior seafarers and cadets in this journey, that I've realized that sometimes, once a seafarer captain from Croatia shared this story, that when he was put on board a Spanish ship, it was very difficult for him because no one spoke the language or no one ate his food. However, he was able to, him being a Croatian, he was able to go and make friends with a few Filipinos. And Filipinos are anyway very friendly. So then he used to hang around with them, even though they were a bit less in terms of their rank, but still he found comfort in them. But unfortunately, we don't see that happening nowadays. Nowadays, when we feel lonely, we turn to our devices. That's actually making things even more complicated. So then we are in a situation where we have to teach people to how to connect. I see young couples, getting into a relationship over emojis and then breaking up over emojis. It's like you can't even say it's 2-minute noodles because it's make and break very quickly. And then people block communication as well. It's very easy to block someone from WhatsApp, block someone from Facebook and Instagram and all that. So you never have a conversation. It's very difficult for this generation to look into someone's eyes and actually say something, express something. But I would say every generation is messed up. Even our generation was messed up. Very recently, I read this very interesting quote where it speaks about children. and children are tyrants. They no longer respect elders, and they chatter in places and this and that. And when I tell this to parents, and they go, yeah, nowadays kids are like that. But the interesting part is that this was said by Socrates about children in that generation. I would say every generation is messed up. So this is where it's not up to us to fix a generation, because our way, our tools will not work for them. That is something we need to understand and make peace with. They already have tools, very modern tools.
Emotional intelligence again.
Exactly. So what we need to do is we need to give them that navigation. So how they can use their tools and then, change it, because our way of working will never work for them. So they can actually tackle the world, they can face the world using their tools, but they need a little bit of polishing, a little bit of guidance. Yes. That's all. And I think we don't need to interrupt their soul to do that. So we need to have that understanding as well. But of course, if we feel that, we need to interfere and change their life, that will boost our ego. But it's going to mess up things, believe me. So sometimes we need to let generations be also. But at the same time, what we should give from our end is actually that guidance and the support. So that is what, with the work that I do, that I give, because you need to understand the pulse of individuals. That is, again, I would say emotional intelligence. Yes. You understanding the pulse, you knowing the fact that, which spoon to use, what kind of words to use when you address individuals. I would say you see that change with every generation. So that, I think, should be considered as a challenge to us. I think we need to also fix ourselves as well. Yeah.
Absolutely spot on. So I think what you exactly mentioned about, we need to understand that they have smarter ways of doing things.
Very true.
In comparison to the way that we did them.
Of course.
So
of course.
That is the emotional intelligence aspect. Am I right?
Of course. Of course.
So that's what is important. So then it will be easy for us to guide them in the proper way. Otherwise, they might try to mess up, or maybe they might end up losing in their career. So we just need to understand what they really want, the elements or the ingredients that we should inculcate in them for them to march forward.
True. I think for any generation, what we need is actually adaptability. Sasanka, because you know what, even let's say Charles Darwin said animals who are, I would say, who adopt to change are the ones who will survive.
Exactly.
So we need to adopt, and they need to learn how to adopt as well.
Absolutely.
That's the thing.
Yes.
So it's again like should happen in a wonderful harmony. They should know that they have certain things to learn from us. At the same time, we also should know that we need to learn certain things from them also and change our approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Rasini, on that note, we are moving into the final question. So we'll just add a bit of fun to this question. So it's fun and wisdom, I would say. What was the last book you read, or the book you're reading now, and the last Netflix series you watched?
Okay, so the book I'm reading currently, I'm actually reading it for the second time. It's Ikigai. That's a Japanese way for a happy life. Yes. And I think it combines a lot of things, because it speaks about logo theory that was introduced by Viktor Frankl. So his book, Man's Search for Meaning, is also another favorite of mine. But it's like this, Sasanka. Sometimes, what happens is, depending on how my life is, I sometimes reread certain books as well. I would say I read even Lasana Vasirisa when I feel like I need to get my head away from, something. So Vasilisa the Beautiful, it's a, Russian, tales, fairy tales.
Right.
And then Ikigai is a book that I really like. It's very small, very simple to understand. So focusing on your well-being, again, is what Ikigai is about. And so that's the book that I'm rereading again, I would say. And also I finished reading Priyanka Chopra's autobiography. So I love autobiographies. I think there's a great deal to learn about people. And also, whenever I get an opportunity to gift something to someone, I always gift a book as well. And the last Netflix series, again, I'm rewatching Narcos. I really enjoyed it. I think they touch on so many elements. So it's also making me realize a lot of things also, and why certain people feel certain things about other individuals. And yeah, so those two, and yeah, that's what's happening at the moment.
Amazing, Rasini. So I think, Rasini, we have reached the end of the launch episode of Winning CV Game Changers. We would like to have this conversation going. I think we can even talk for days, maybe months, right?
Of
But
course.
time is always the constraint. So this conversation would really help the youth around the world. So because the Winning CV Game Changers podcast is dedicated to bring the wisdom of personalities like yourself, and we are about to feature a few more personalities in the future. And thank you very much for accepting the invite and joining in the launch episode of Winning CV Game Changers podcast.
Thank you so much, Sasanka, for giving me the honor for, to coming in as the first guest for the series. And I want to wish you and your team all the very best. And good that you're doing something like this. And I think that, like I earlier said, that we have a lot to learn from the generations to come, and they have a lot to learn from the generations that's been there. So yeah, all the very best, and for this brand new venture. Thank you so much again for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rasini. There you go. It's the end of the launch episode of Winning CV Game Changers podcast with Rasini Bandara, international well-being consultant. I hope that the wisdom Rasini shared with all of you would help you in your forward march to conquer the world. So let me use this quote, which I posted on social media very recently. It said, the more I learn, I realize that I have more to learn. On that note, we are going to wrap up the launch episode of Winning CV Game Changers podcast. We will see you soon with another episode and featuring another personality who is a game changer. Until next time, take care.